The ship got hit hard when we fled Seleucami. Several systems have been glitching ever since. Repairs would go faster if I had some help.
As soon as I finish building this scanner, testing the functionality of our inhibitor chips takes precedence.
I thought you said they were defective.
A theory this device will be able to prove. Besides, the ship-wide diagnostic report indicated no critical systems were compromised.
Oh, greetings once again, Bucketheads. Mavar Tigar? Welcome to the 55th Ordo Moondragon Deceiving episode of Mando Vision. Nargai Tom, and thank you so much for checking out this small, independent Star Wars podcast. Remember, the best way to reach out to us is via social media at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. You can email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share the show with all the other Mandalorians in your covert. And if possible or so inclined, sweet 5-star reviews are very, very helpful. They help the small independent podcasts like us stand out and not get crushed by the Empire's boot heel. And we appreciate any and all help we can get on that front. Remember, we are on your favorite podcasting platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Pandora, Amazon, Audible, and so many, many more. And if you need me on more, I'll get us there. Don't worry about it. All right, we're here. Episode 3 of The Bad Batch debuted today, and as we have maintained since the show dropped, we are doing a day of episodes to cover the show, and it's been a lot of fun so far. I'm having a really great time watching this show. I think it's getting really positive feedback from the viewers. Everyone I see on social media seems to be really, really enjoying the show. I've not heard any real negative criticism about the show, and I'd like to see that continue. I mean, it is interesting in one sense because at this point, yes, it's a new show, but it's a fairly finely tuned machine at this point. You know, after 7 seasons of the Clone Wars, and everything like that. I mean, this show and Rebels. I should include Rebels in that as well. 7 seasons of the Clone Wars. We had 5 of Rebels, and yeah, they know what they're doing over there. So not a surprise that they are, in mid stride already, 3 episodes into the show. So we're going to talk about that and get into it today. But before we do that, we have to do something that's just going to be insanely important because, listen, it's a very special day in Star Wars land, and that always involves us taking the time to talk about that. And if you haven't quite figured out what I'm talking about, because I'm speaking in really vague terms, and it wasn't the intention, today is the day that we thank the Maker. It is George Lucas's birthday, and we wish George Lucas a very, very happy birthday. I'm sure he's listening to this podcast with his feet up and a Mandalorian helmet on his head, because why wouldn't you just sit around with your feet up and a Mandalorian helmet on your head listening to podcasts all day? That's kind of how I do it. If you want to like a peek behind the curtain, that's me like 99% of the time during the day. Feet up, bucket on. That's how we do. All right? So happy birthday, George Lucas. Thank you. We thank you once again for all you have done, all you've provided for us, the beautiful bounty that is Star Wars that you brought into this world with the help of some very fine people as well. We don't want to, we want to spread the love on that. But thank you, George. Without you, there's no Star Wars. There's no Indy. There's no Willow. There's no Tucker, a man in his dream. So thank you so much, Mr. George Lucas. I hope you're having a birthday for the ages. I believe it is your 77th birthday, which means 77 slices of cake coming your way, courtesy of the Mandovision podcast. So get ready. You're going to be busy eating those. All right, like I said, we thank the Maker. Happy birthday, George Lucas. Let's get into our show today. Episode 2 of The Bad Batch, Replacements. All right, here we go. You know what you got to do. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
Well, that doesn't look comfortable. For either of you.
We're fine.
Yeah. Chow time. Ah, finally! Hit me again. Well, that's all for now. Rations are low.
You can have mine.
Hey, Omega doesn't even have a place to sleep. You want to take her food too? Oh, no thanks. You keep it.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I'm not used to having a kid around here. Well, none of us are. But she's not complaining.
As we said at the top, this is Season 1, Episode 3 of The Bad Batch, episode titled Replacements. Our plot: the Batch gets stuck on a desolate moon. As bare bones a description as you can get of this plot. There's a lot more going on in this story, and we will talk about all of that in due time. Our director for this episode is Nathaniel Villanueva, once again written by Matt Mishevitz. Please, I hope I'm getting that right. I apologize if I am not. Our voice cast today, as always, the great D. Bradley Baker as the Bad Batch. Michelle Ang is Omega. We have a couple other appearances. Oh, Ben Diskin is AZI-3. You may recognize that droid by now. Stephen Stanton is Admiral Tarkin and Fighter Number 1. Emilio Garcia Sanchez is ESO-1. Daniele Hall is ESO-4. These are the troopers, by the way, in case you're not following along. The new recruits for the Empire. Gwendolyn Yo is Fighter 2 and Nala Se. Bob Bergen is Lamasu. Jonathan Lipow is the Ordo Moon Dragon and a refugee. And Noshir Dalal is Vice Admiral Rampart, a character we sort of got a glimpse of in last week's episode as he was issuing the order for the chain codes. And we learned that it's this Admiral Rampart who this chain code thing was his contribution to the Imperial war machine. So that's our voice cast for today. And yeah, we have a really interesting episode. And I'm going to break it down probably very differently than I normally do. You know, a lot of times when we do the rewatch of Clone Wars, or even when we do our Mandalorian episodes, we go in a very chronological way. We kind of work our way through the show from A to B to C to D. Starting at the beginning all the way to the very, very end. This episode, I wanted to sort of split it up because we sort of have the A story and the B story. And for argument's sake, we'll say that Hunter and Omega and the Batch are the A story, and then Crosshair, the recruits, and everything going on in Camino and going on with the Empire is the B story. And yeah, I want to kind of talk about them in those terms because our episode title is Replacements, and that has a very for each story that has very different meaning. And I think everyone can very easily see what we're getting at with that. I mean, with the Batch's sort of new family dynamic with Omega, they're missing their brother Crosshair, and I don't think they view Omega as a replacement by any means. But as the numbers go, she sort of like fills that spot, and we see a little bit of that when she comes across his sniper gear, and then obviously on the Imperial side of things. It's Crosshair replacing his brothers with a new squad of troopers of basically a new version of Clone Force 99, but this time instead of clones, instead of them being his genetic brothers, these are recruits. These are Imperial recruits, and there's a lot of discussion about loyalty in that B storyline, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we get into it. But yeah, for right now, we're going to focus on that A storyline, on the Batch, on Hunter, and on Omega. So let's kind of get into that. Well, as you know from the sounds, from the clips we've been playing, and from watching the episode, our heroes having escaped narrowly. I'll say narrowly escaped from Seleucami in the last episode. Their ship did manage to take some damage. I think that's something we kind of wondered about a little bit as the stormtroopers were blasting away at their ship as they were leaving orbit there, or attempting to break orbit. So ship systems fail. They have to crash on a desolate moon. But before that all happens, there's a lot of stuff in those sound clips that's very interesting. That shows how the dynamic with the Bad Batch is changing with Omega's presence. We have that wonderful scene. Her easygoing nature and her curious, casual demeanor I think it's just this wonderful presence to juxtapose against this kind of like hardened military unit that is the Bad Batch against Clone Force 99. So she brings something new to the table here, a new dynamic that they don't know how to deal with necessarily, but they're trying to figure it out as they learn this new family dynamic that they're shifting into. But I love seeing her like laying up against like the knocked over gonk droid. Something about that just tickled me a little bit, and how she seemed to just think not think much of it. She's like, I'm comfortable, it's fine, all good, all is good here. And then they're even eating rations, which again, that's something that we hadn't really discussed yet. Like, what is the conditions going to be for the Bad Batch as they are sort of wandering the galaxy now? They don't really seem to have a purpose just yet. They don't seem to have solid footing on what their game plan is going to be. But I think we start to get a little bit of a hint of where that's going to go. And that, a lot of that has to do with what happens next, just before the power shorts out. We do see the power fluctuations as lights flicker on and off in the ship. And by the way, the ship is very quickly becoming the Bad Batch's home, and that we definitely see that reinforced by the end of the episode. And you know what I'm talking about when Rin Wrecker builds the bedroom basically for Omega, and I just a really sweet, touching moment. This A story has all the heart and emotion in it, while the B story is all the imperial horror show, as some may consider it, as we just sort of see the underlying tyranny and darkness that is the Empire, and the boot heel on which they decide to step on the galaxy with. So I want to talk about that scene where, and we played the clip of it, where Tech is building that scanner so that they can get readings and data from those inhibitor chips that are implanted in them. And Echo makes mention that he thought they were defective. But as with Crosshair, we know that it wasn't defective. It was just kind of like muted and tamped down. And then Tarkin, in that first episode, was able to boost it and make Crosshair a extremely loyal and dedicated soldier of the New Galactic Empire. I think it's smart of Tech and the rest of the team to try to solve what the heck's in their heads and get to the bottom of that. And see if they are potentially at risk of losing their free will at some point. And that's sort of the other question that we will have to wrestle with down the road. How much of this is against Crosshair's will? Is he just doing what he wanted to do? We saw that he had problems with Hunter defying orders and not being a good soldier. Good soldiers follow orders. That's Crosshair's mantra at this point in the show. So I think that's gonna be something that we get to explore, and the idea of, again, I will use the term that we've used a lot in our rewatch of the Clone Wars, that the Grand Army of the Republic is a slave army, and they are born and bred for combat only, but they are sentient beings who are stripped of choice and the wrongness that is implied in that, and we see the Bad Batch acting very much with free will. And I do believe that will be an underlying theme of the show as we sort of move forward here. The ability to choose to do the right thing and the wrong thing. And right now the Bad Batch seems to be following along with things. But maybe Tarkin's going to develop a way to amplify those chips, those inhibitor chips in Clone Force 99 and bring them back to the fold and make them loyal and dedicated soldiers. I think what's more likely to happen and I think we all have suspected this, is that eventually at some point they will go and they will try to rescue Crosshair and bring him back and sort of deprogram him. But this is a first step. The scanner that Tech is developing is going to be a key component of that, as they have to learn more about the chip that's in their head and how to combat it or turn it off or whatever it is they're going to have to do so that they can rescue their brother. Because that's the other thing in this episode that you really feel from the batch is the loss and the missing of Crosshair, of their brother, and it's sad. It's sad that it's a little heartbreaking to think of it in those terms. I mean, you think about your own family and you think about your own relationships with people and how someone would go astray essentially and leave that family unit behind to do something that the others are considering to be very, very wrong. So I'm very intrigued by all that, and that's just the opening of the show. We haven't even gotten to like the action yet. Like we haven't even crash landed on the moon just yet. But that's what happens. They crash land on the moon. I think it's really funny. I like the fact that like Tech says, "Oh, the ship's fine. I ran the diagnostics. We're all good." And then that's right when everything goes to heck, because that's very much a Star Wars thing, you know, to think everything's we're going according to plan, and then boom, the bottom falls out from underneath you. So they crash land on this moon. They got to replace some power capacitors. It just so happens this Ordo moon dragon is attracted to the power source. The creature steals the power source, and so they have to go out and track the creature, get their power capacitor back, and this leads to a more of bonding time between Hunter and Omega. What's interesting also about this episode, interesting is not the right word, but during the crash landing, we see once again Wrecker bumping his head pretty hard during the crash, and this causes him to not be able to leave the ship. Hunter leaves him behind to kind of do his ship stuff. You know, doesn't think he's going to be okay out there because of the injury he seems to have sustained, and this allows Wrecker the time to end up building that makeshift bedroom in the ship for Omega, and again we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But no, really nice stuff. You get Hunter and Omega on their own, tracking this creature. Again, and I go back to Omega and her curiosity, her natural curiosity, and wanting to be like Hunter and wanting to learn how to track and be, you know, remember they are, you know, clone cousins of a sort. You know, they have the same genetic material. At least that's the assumption that based off of interviews I've read, I am asserting that she is of the Jango Fett DNA genome, and that they are distantly related. I know I've read there's been a lot of other speculation that she is not, and maybe that will turn out to be the ultimate revelation. But for the discussion at this point, let's just kind of go with that. The data that we have saying that she is of the same genome as them, so they are connected to each other. And again, I really like that just that again that sort of natural curiosity, that exuberance that Omega exudes, her wanting to see and do everything, and I don't know, it's so charming, and to compare and contrast it against the Bad Batch, again, these hardened soldiers who you know, just spent, you know, 3 years deep behind enemy lines doing all kinds of crazy missions on behalf of the Galactic Republic. So I really like that, and I think this scene kind of gets us. The scene with Hunter and Omega kind of gets us to where we want to be from the previous episode. I know I sort of talked about how I thought they were going a little fast with that a father-daughter relationship between the two. This episode to me goes a long way to helping get us to that point. The way they talk to each other, the way that Hunter lets her come on the mission. Like, he seems to have learned from Seleucami and the experiences there, and trying to keep her in a box and protect her by not letting her experience anything. But I think in his heart, like, he knows that she's a clone and she's quite capable, so he needs to kind of give her a little bit of trust at the same time. And that happens. And one of the things I did like about this episode a lot is they used the rebreather masks, because obviously we were on a moon that had a not breathable atmosphere, which is not something we get to see a lot of in Star Wars. You know, surprisingly, very often we are on worlds where you can just crash land and it's all good outside, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't mean that as a criticism, just as an observation. So I like seeing the rebreather masks, and particularly when the Ordo Moon Dragon engages after they have successfully tracked the dragon and they have found the capacitor, and they are trying to recover it, and the Moon Dragon attacks Hunter, knocks the mask, and Omega has to replace it. But you know, Hunter's taken some bad atmosphere into his lungs, and he's kind of out of it for a few moments, and this allows us to follow Omega as she begins to make her way into the Moon Dragon's lair in an attempt to, I think in her mind, earn her place with the Bad Batch by recovering that capacitor to get them out of there. And we get some really interesting stuff in that sequence.
It's getting away! Hunter, you're Hunter, wake up! Wake up! Echo, Wrecker, Tech, come in! We need help!
So I really like that sequence there as she's sort of contemplating what to do. She sees Hunter's blaster, grabs it, takes it. What I really like about the sequence that follows while she is in those tunnels of the moon dragon, how she's armed, and we've seen her fire the gun in that first episode, but she doesn't seem to have a proclivity towards that level of violence. Like, she doesn't seem to be, like, I'm not saying she's a pacifist by any means, but she is able to intuit solutions that result in that can be done with nonviolence without having to blast the moon dragon. And I that speaks a lot to who this character is and her nature. And so I really like that. I love how she kind of sort of puzzles out the moon dragon and the part with the flashlight, and that it was interested in that battery pack, and she was able to use that as a decoy to distract the moon dragon so that she could grab the capacitor and get out of the tunnels and return to Hunter. That says so much about who this character is, and again, her sort of true nature. You know, she may want to be part of this bad batch, but the skill set she's going to bring is going to be entirely different from that of just another clone soldier. She's going to have a lot more to bring to the table, and this also kind of helps to deepen a bit of the mystery of, like, what is the purpose of Omega? What was she cloned for by the Kaminoans? And again, that I believe that will be something that we get to over the course of this season of the show, and I'm really excited to see what they decide to do. I'm still sort of the idea that she will be used as a weapon against the clones, but I've seen a lot of other speculation about that goes in very, very different directions. You know, there seems to be some Jedi talk amongst people. I'm not a fan of that idea, mostly just because, like, I'm okay with there being a Star Wars show that doesn't revolve around the Jedi or the birthing of the rebellion. But I wouldn't be surprised if the show at least did the birthing of the rebellion, as maybe the Bad Batch sort of plants the seeds for rebellion. As you know, we've already seen Saw Gerrera in this show, so I mean, who knows? We'll see how that all shakes out. But yeah, it says so much about this character, and I'm so intrigued by her and charmed by her that again the contrasting nature of her against the batch, against Clone Force 99, is really something to see. I'm very charmed by it and endeared by it so far, and I'd like to see it continue to develop and deepen. And again, what I like about this episode too is not just about Hunter and Omega deepening their bond and having that sort of father-daughter relationship that we kind of saw foreshadowed last week, but the stuff with Wrecker in this episode, you know, as she sort of is connecting with all the characters in the batch. You know, we haven't seen her much with Tech or Echo, but I would assume they will get their moment to connect with this girl at some point during the course of the season. But I really like the stuff that with Wrecker. I like the Wrecker going out of his way, you know, and Wrecker's sort of like the overgrown child of the Bad Batch, anyways. So seeing him do this extra, you know, going above and beyond to make this girl feel welcome, to feel like part of the family, part of the team. I should have said that backwards. I should have said part of the team, then part of the family. You know what I meant. It says a lot about Wrecker too. You know, Wrecker sort of has a bit of a childlike wonder too. It's just a more destructive and aggressive for sort of a childlike wonder, as he really just enjoys destroying things. He is called Wrecker after all. But yeah, no, really, really nice stuff. It doesn't get more heartwarming than the scene with the bedroom. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It's just so cool. It's so cool. So now we're going to transition into that B storyline with the Imperials. But there's one more scene I want to play with the Batch to kind of be that transition. And this is when they're looking for the parts to kind of fix the ship. And Omega comes across Crosshair's weapon kit. And the conversation that follows afterwards, I think this is really interesting stuff. So I want to kind of use this to branch into the next half of the conversation. Check it out.
Fine. I'll say it. I kinda miss him. He shot you, remember?
Ha! I sure do. That hurt.
It's worth noting the possibility that Crosshair's actions were influenced by his inhibitor chip. It can do that?
That's what it was designed to do.
So, it wasn't Crosshair's fault.
Well,
Look, debating this won't fix the ship. Right now we need to find that capacitor and get off this rock.
So again, I really like that. Hunter kind of cuts off the conversation, but Tech and his reply of, well, is it? Again, that gets into our free will, and is the inhibitor chip the thing that's controlling him, or is it just making him more clear cut in his, a good soldier follows orders mentality, and that's one reason why I think this is a really interesting conversation to keep having as the show plays out, as we kind of get into this. I'm very curious if free will and freedom to choose kind of comes up naturally through the progression of the show, because as I've maintained, and they don't really talk about it too much on the show, but I maintain the Grand Army of the Republic is a slave army, and it's an important conversation to get into at a certain point. And this seems like the show that might do it, because now that we sort of have cleared the decks of the Jedi and all their business, and we got to Order 66. Now we can kind of get into some stuff. We can get deep on some of the thematic issues, some of the moral quandaries that led to the fall of the Republic and the rise of the Empire. Like, now is the time to kind of get into these things and parse it all out. So I really want to see how this all shakes out.
A strong ruling government requires an increase in soldiers to maintain order throughout the galaxy.
Our facilities are fully capable of creating more clones for the task.
Sustaining such a vast engagement is not one clones must do alone. There are other ways of producing loyal soldiers.
As I've mentioned before on episodes reviewing the Bad Batch, I am completely intrigued and fascinated by the process by which the Empire is going through to replace the clones and to bring about a conscripted army of individuals. And the sort of Rampart's way of talking about certain ways to bring about loyalty. And loyalty, I think, is obviously going to be a big theme on the show as well. We sort of hinted at it with the clip. Is Crosshair loyal because of the inhibitor chip? Are the other clones loyal because of the inhibitor chips? That's something that needs to be discussed and shown throughout the show. And it'll be interesting to see what Tech comes up with as he begins to his investigation into the inhibitor chip and its natural properties. Obviously, Omega will have or ought to have something to do about this because she seems keenly aware of the inhibitor chips and what they bring to the table. So if there's going to be some sort of solution in liberating Crosshair from the inhibitor chip, Omega will probably play a part in it. But at the same time, you have to wonder, will they give this choice to the other clones, to their other brothers? Now, again, we've seen how isolated the batch is, how isolated Clone Force 99 is from the other clones, because they are viewed as rejects. They are viewed as not knots. They are viewed as knots, basically. They are not they're not viewed by the other clones as the same, and so there is a distance there between their other. Again, genetically similar, but very, very different in the eyes of each clone. The regs, as they are called on the show. So what we get to next is we find out that Crosshair is going to be the leader of this new regiment, this new small but group of soldiers, new elite soldiers. Again, replacements for the Bad Batch that are on the run, for Clone Force 99 that is now on the run in the galaxy. And we learned a little bit about, we just get a little bit about them. One of the recruits mentions how he felt completely abandoned by the Republic. The Empire gives him 3 squares of meals a day and a roof over his head, and that's fine by him, and he's going to be a good soldier because of that. And this is where Tarkin decides to test them out by sending them back to Onderon to kill Saul Guerrera and his rebel forces there on the moon. What we get next is completely horrifying as this new Stormtrooper squadron moves in and quickly dispatches the Guerrera's forces that are still on the moon. Guerrera long gone at this point, but they want his location. No one knows where it is. Saw Gerrera doesn't talk about that stuff. He's not going to just be all willy-nilly that I'm going, hey, I'll be hanging out at the cantina in Mos Eisley. He's not talking like that. So what we get next is, again, completely horrifying, but let's check it out real quick. All right, I'm going to go ahead and play the scene out. It's a little long, so I'll kind of talk to the quiet parts. This is after Crosshair has ruthlessly killed the pilot of this ship and set the evacuees back to the surface of Onderon, and now they are very intimidatingly escorting them off the ship. One of them has a flamethrower. I mean, it's nuts. Like, this is just, woo, it's dark. This is some dark stuff here. Check it out.
Where's Guerrera?
I don't know, but I wouldn't tell you if I did.
I believe you.
Brutal. Just
Do
brutal.
any of you have information you'd like to share?
We don't know anything. We were promised transport off-world, that's all.
Then you're of no use to the Empire.
What are you doing? Guerrera's fighters are dead. These are civilians. We should bring them in.
Those weren't our orders.
Forget our orders. This is wrong.
So you're not going to comply?
No. None of us are. Ignore the clone. We signed up to be soldiers, not an execution squad. We're going to detain the prisoners and take them in for questioning.
You want to know why they put me in charge? It's because I'm willing to do what needs to be done.
And that guy just got a hole in his chest.
Good soldiers follow orders. Finish the mission.
Oh, this is bad news. Ooh, and he's just so cold. Crosshair is just so cold as he stares and watches as these new recruits butcher these people, massacre these people, and civilians, like as was stated, unarmed non-combatants, basically, and again, completely representative of what this empire is all about and what this empire means in the grand scheme of the galaxy, and to see the way Crosshair does it, and I think we are supposed to ask ourselves, like, is this the chips doing, or is this Crosshair? And it's a valid reason. It's a valid argument. It'll be so interesting to see what happens when Clone Force 99 comes to rescue Crosshair. Like, are they going to be able to get through to him? Like, once that inhibitor chip is out, does it really change Crosshair, or is this who he actually is? That I think is really one of the interesting aspects of the story that we're going to get to, and it's such a wonderful dichotomy. I didn't expect this to be the case when this show came about, when it first debuted. Now, I am not a person who goes online and it goes online and looks for spoilers and wild fan theories and speculation. I don't do that because I like to come up with my own and share it with you all on this podcast. So if anyone knew ahead of time that one of the batch was going to turn and go Empire and be against them, that was not something that I had expected, but it was something that they played so well in that opening 70-minute episode to kick off this season of the show, and I'm so intrigued by the ideas and the themes and all of this stuff that they could. I mean, again, they could totally not get into these things, and it would be disappointing, but they could still tell a really compelling story. I hope that they're going to dive deep into the idea of free will and individuality necessarily. Again, individuality in this clone army is something that we were taught a long time during the course of the 7 years of the show. Yes, they're clones, but they are unique individuals, and perhaps Crosshair is just more in line with the Imperial way of thinking. We're going to find that out. I'm very curious how that all shakes out. I can't wait to see how we explore more of the inhibitor chip stuff, the rise of the Empire, Crosshair's training and of these new recruits, and The way loyalty is brought up and discussed in this episode is also very, very interesting. You know, Crosshair, you wonder, is Crosshair's loyalty because of that inhibitor chip? You know, are these new recruits now loyal because of what he just made them do to these non-armed combatants? These unarmed non-combatants, excuse me. So how does the Empire earn loyalty when they commit atrocities? That's something that I hope we can explore a little bit more fully as well. You know, then like I said, Crosshair's got his mantra, and he's passing it on to these recruits. Good soldiers follow orders, which I think we all know is a bit of a contradiction in many, many senses. You know, following orders is often the excuse of a poor soldier who makes poor decisions in the face of right and wrong. So this is all stuff I want to explore. This is all stuff I want to see, and I can't wait to see what they do next. I really dug this episode. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. It's a real blast. And you know, I don't know if you've been... I can't even remember if we have been giving out ratings or anything. But if we haven't been, that's a mistake on my part. This is an 8.5, easy. Almost, you know, I'd say it's almost a 9. Except I want to kind of see how it all plays out. I want to see where we land on some certain things. Easy 8.5. I love the contrasting dark and lightness as well in the episode. You know, you have that A storyline with the Batch and Omega, and like their bonding and their family building on that desolate moon. You know, kind of maroon there. And then you have the contrast of the darkness, the rise of the Empire, the chain codes, the recruitment of these new soldiers, and Crosshair is just completely cold ruthlessness, and that being instilled into these new recruits. I love it so much. Again, it's a wonderful juxtaposition of light and dark, the contrasts. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's a great episode. Really, really dug it. Can't wait to see what we get next week. And that concludes our review of Replacements, Episode 3 of Season 1 of The Bad Batch. So on a quick programming note before we wrap up for the day, I wanted to give you a heads up that on Monday we're dropping a new episode, but it won't be a Clone Wars rewatch episode. No. We're going to take a little pause because we got about like 4 or 5 episodes that are pretty tightly connected coming up. But the other weekend, a couple weekends ago, I sat down with my brother Mark, who you may remember from our Star Wars Podcast Day episode, and we did a review on Ewoks: Caravan of Courage, and I can't wait for you all to hear it. It's a pretty fun episode. It's a pretty fun discussion. We get into some of the craziness that is that movie, that old TV movie from the 80s that I remember very, very well. I don't know how many of you in the listening audience were watching it back in like 1984 when it debuted on ABC. But now that it's on that vintage tab on the Star Wars page on Disney Plus, everyone can watch these things, and it's kind of cool to be able to revisit some of the stuff that is basically branded as legends, but is also very, very interesting. So we're gonna, over the course of time, we are gonna explore the content that's on that vintage tab. You know, the 2 Ewoks movies, the 2 seasons of Tartakovsky's Clone Wars are on there. We'll get to the Faithful Wookiee as well, the part of the holiday special that's been excised and placed on that vintage tab. Yeah, we're gonna get into all of it. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So that's coming on Monday. Ewoks: Caravan of Courage. Get ready for that one, and then we'll be back on Friday with the next episode of The Bad Batch, and then the following Monday we resume our Clone Wars rewatch. So that's the next 3 episodes for you. Get ready. If you want to take your bucket off to grab a soda or something, bag of chips, this will be just fine. Just fine. I want to thank everyone once again for listening to this podcast. My name is Tom, and this is the Mandovision Podcast. Please follow us on social media. at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Please give us a follow and like those sweet pictures that I'm dropping. It's so much fun. You can reach out to us via email, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Pandora, Amazon, Audible, and so many, many more. Please make sure you're liking, subscribing, and sharing the show with all your friends, family, loved ones, the Mandalorians in your covert, people you have life debts to, people in life debts to you, and people you have blood feuds with. That's perfect. That's the audience we want. So please help us out by doing so. And if you have the time and can write a 5-star review, it would go a really, really long way to defeating the tyranny that is the algorithm, aka the Empire. So thank you very much for listening to this episode of Mandovision. We're going to be back so soon. Like, you're not even going to know what happened. Like, it's just going to be so fast. So fast. I thank you all once again for listening. And one more time, we thank the maker. Happy birthday, George Lucas. All right, this podcast can only end one way. And this is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
I never had my own room before.
Well, you're part of this squad now, too.